Today we're really going to be working on this stupid Hemi Predator bucket project, which, you know, like much in the same way that Donald Rumsfeld looked like a normal human, but was actually a complete and total piece of... This engine looks like an engine, but is actually a complete and total piece of... So yeah, it's only been a year, right? I mean, but we're gonna finish it. We're gonna put it all together and fire it up. It might be awesome. It's probably gonna suck, but we'll find out. In the course of doing that, we're gonna talk a little bit about how to set your ignition timing without a timing key. That's pretty important stuff. And you know, that's probably it. That's probably the only useful thing other than the chance that this thing is gonna go on the dyno and just explode. Okay, so the first thing we got to do is find top dead center on the motor. Top dead center would be the point at which the piston is at the top of the bore on the power stroke, okay? And that, at that point, the intake valve and exhaust valve are completely closed. That's why we use that point to set our valve lash, right? Because they're both completely slack at that point. We do this, we basically need to figure that out also to figure out our ignition timing. So here's how we're gonna do that. There's a couple of ways to do it. The janky kind of ghetto way would be just stick something down in the spark plug hole. Here, let me get something to turn this with. Stick something, anything down in the spark plug hole, right? And then work the motor through watching the valve. So let's see, here we go. There's our exhaust valve, and then he closes up and our intake valve opens, and then the intake valve starts to close and our piston is on the way back up, and we're up, 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 all the way at the tippy top. That's as far as she goes. Now that's pretty close to top dead center right there. You could probably go with that. I have a junky old dial indicator that I use. And that lets me just really find exactly. And there, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just sticking it down in the hole, right? And then I'm just jogging the motor back and forth until I get the highest point. And there we are. We're at top dead center, okay? Now what I'm gonna do, you put your degree wheel on. First thing we do is we put our little pointer on, right? So we stick our little pointer on. And tighten that down so it's not going to move around too much. So this is my degree wheel. Basically this would go on here, like so. And then we just take our little pointer, since we know we're at top dead center, and we point it to 0 degrees. Cool. Now we know exactly where the motor is at any time. By moving it backward and forward, we can put it exactly at the point where we want it, right? So I want my ignition to be, you know, based on the compression in this motor and stuff, I think we want to light this thing off pretty early. So I'm gonna say between 30 and 32 degrees of timing probably is more than enough. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna roll it back to 30 degrees before top dead center, right? Okay, so we need to get our original timing key out of here. The easiest way to get the keys out is with a pair of dikes, all right? I'm just gonna kind of grab the end of it and rock that sucker out of there. Come on, get out of there. Sometimes they're kind of welded in there, but there we go. We don't need any key. We don't need no stinking key. Okay, so let's throw the coil on. Not crazy tight, and we never really tighten things with these guys, all right? I mean, you can run the bolts in, but don't tighten stuff with it. All right, so we've got our coil set kind of far away, so it's just not in our way right now. This is going to end up going there. This Don't do this, guys. People put these zip ties on here because they use it to shut the motor off. They yank the spark plug wire off. It just f***s your spark plug wire up. Don't do that. There's a shut-off switch. And if there's not, make a shut-off switch. You just have to ground this wire and it'll stop it. Okay, enough of that, right? Okay, so look, everybody treats these cast iron flywheels like it's a ticking time bomb that you must get rid of. If you can, yeah, you should absolutely at least buy a cast aluminum one. The billet ones, I don't know if they're better. They sure look better. But either way, either is absolutely, without a doubt, an improvement over the original cast iron one. However, I don't believe that the cast iron flywheels are necessarily as dangerous as people make them out to be. Inherently, however, they're put on wrong and that causes problems. Here's what I'm thinking. The flywheel bore is tapered, right? It goes onto a tapered shaft. If you took this and rammed it on too tight, right, you would be spreading this. It wouldn't take long for this to crack and blow apart into a million pieces. That's not a problem with the flywheel. That's a problem with people getting these things and just going like, brrr, you know, and knocking them on there. There's a torque spec for a reason, and if you set them correctly, which we always do, I've never seen one just grenade like that, okay? It's possible that there's some inherent casting flaw in some, you know, right? All it takes is one black swan to prove that not all swans are white. But most swans are white. Most cast iron flywheels are fairly safe. The two sorts of failures that we see all the time with a cast iron flywheel, at least in my experience, is one, somebody either gorillas the thing down with a 6-foot, you know, breaker bar and over torques it, or uses, God forbid, uses an impact wrench and whacks that thing down. And again, it's a recipe for disaster. You're just jamming a wedge into the center, it's gonna break. The other failure that's much more common is the magnet flying off, right? Maybe the magnets fly off, it's possible. I doubt it though. They're screwed on, they're also glued on. I don't know, I've never seen one just fly off, but here's what I think happens. The coil is adjustable, right? You can adjust the gap between the flywheel and the coil by moving it on these slotted mounting holes. I think what's happening is the coils vibrate themselves loose because these little motors, you know, shake like an alcoholic. The coil falls in against the flywheel, right? It comes around, bang, catches the magnet. Two things happen. One, it rips the coil off, blows a big hole in the side of the block. With it, takes these mounts off, takes a big chunk out of the side of the block. Also rips the magnet off. Magnet comes flying through the sheet metal side cover, you know, hits somebody in the leg, they, you know, bleed out. Everybody's heard a story, right? So anyway, we built a ton of spec go-kart race motors with cast iron flywheels. Because of the rules, and they hold together. 7,000, 7,500 RPMs. They hold together. I'm not. Little bit of legalese here. I am not an engineer. I'm not a lawyer. I am not a doctor. I am not giving you any advice whatsoever. And if you listen to me, it's only because you listen to idiots. Okay. However, this idiot's experience is, if you treat them with respect, you put them on correctly, and you make sure that things don't vibrate loose, it's not a death sentence to run it, okay? So here's how we run it without a flywheel key. We set our motor, right? We're top dead center. We set our motor to 30 degrees. This is where we want it to be firing. A clone coil and flywheel fires about halfway between these 2 points, okay? So when the magnet is kind of pretty much between these 2 poles, that's when she's firing. Now, You should, if you can, if you have the ability to, you should always check these with a timing light on the dyno, right? Because every magnet is a little bit different. It's mounted, you know, it's a degree off here, a degree off there. These are, you know, whatever. Every situation is different, right? But doing it this way will get you pretty close, okay? Double check it, but if you can't, you know, sleep easy tonight. It's gonna be okay. You're real close. So we set, we're gonna just throw this guy on there, okay? And we're gonna bring it around. Again, I'm not rotating the crankshaft. I'm just putting the flywheel at the firing point, which is, again, just about halfway between these poles, usually. We're gonna take our nut, and right now, we're just gonna tighten it down a little bit just so it doesn't move around. Now what I need to do is lock the crankshaft down so I can tighten this, I can torque it to the appropriate spec. So I'm gonna take my degree wheel off. I have this little locking tool that I made out of a 30 series torque converter driver. So we're gonna throw that on there. Let's get a bolt in there, a couple of threads just to hold it. Okay, so now we can go ahead and torque it down and, you know, without having to figure out how to hold the motor from turning. Okay, so we've got our crankshaft locked down, we've got our flywheel in the right place, we've put our blower fan and starter cup on it. We're gonna torque the nut down to 55 foot-pounds. Again, this one's foot-pounds, guys. Everything else on the motor so far has been in inch-pounds, which is foot-pounds divided by 12. So, you know, foot-pounds is a lot more. So, anyway, correct socket is really a 19 millimeter, 3/4 will fit on there. We want to set our wrench to 55 foot-pounds. Right. And torque that baby down. Now while I'm doing this, I'm gonna watch and make sure that my flywheel doesn't turn relative to the crankshaft, right? We don't want that to happen. And there it is. Okay, so that's torqued to the right spec. I'm gonna go ahead and pull my lock off. The last thing we have to do is set the gap between the ignition coil and the flywheel. Remember, right now it's just sitting here finger tight. You can use feeler gauges to do it. You can, you know, some people use like a business card. I think the spec's like 40 or 45 thousandths or something. We made up a little shim that we use because we do so many of these stupid things, and it just goes in there. You know, this is, people will fetishize some of this stuff, like, oh, you know, it has to be 48 thousandths, you know, exactly. It has to be enough, but not too much, and not too little, okay? So, I use a 40 thousandths shim. You can do whatever you want. Okay, so we're gonna lock these down nice and tight, not too tight. You wanna use some Loctite on these, and there you go. Okay, so now all we gotta do is put the stuff on the motor, you know, the furniture. That's kind of boring, so I think we're gonna do it in like a high-speed montage. Ready? Here we go. Jumping out of montage mode for a minute here. Our original carburetor, the thing that came on this thing, was so sad. Here, look at, I mean, it was bad. It was really bad. Completely, I mean, just, you know, so that's garbage. We went in the parts bin and got a less rusty, but not really any more beautiful, but certainly less rusty, stock carburetor that we had. Actually, I stand corrected. This is an old Apex carburetor, so it's mostly stock, just jetted up to a 30, 36 main jet. Shouldn't make a difference because this thing's not going to run shit anyway. Okay, back to montage. All right, your old Uncle Pink kind of like not really paying close attention on this build because again, I don't give a shit about this thing. It's gonna blow up. But here's this little piece of blower housing trim supposed to go on before the flywheel. I forgot it. I don't give a shit, okay? If the motor runs, I'll put it on. Fair? It ain't gonna run. I mean, it'll run. I don't think it's gonna run long. All right, back to montage. Here we go.